FAA analysis reveals that the agency knew there would likely be another Boeing 737 MAX malfunction within 10 months of last year's Lion Air crash that killed 189 people. CBS News transportation correspondent Kris Van Cleave joins us now from Washington with more on this story. Kris, what do we now know?
Well, we know that the FAA issued an emergency order in November, just days after the Lion Air crash, Lion Air Flight 610, the first 737 MAX to crash. In the effort to justify that emergency order, they did an analysis, which is a standard procedure. And part of that analysis was basically a probability, a math calculation on how likely a similar malfunction would be to occur. And when the math was done, it came back that a similar malfunction was likely within 10 months. And that led the FAA to issue this emergency order that advised airlines and pilots about a situation that a malfunctioning sensor basically could push the nose of the plane down repeatedly, and encouraged pilots to familiarize themselves with the standard procedures for what's called a runaway trim event, basically how to turn off the technology. What's interesting, in that initial FAA emergency order, it did not name this MCAS anti-stall system, something that was unknown to the pilots leading up to that Lion Air crash. It's since become very well known, of course, but this analysis was part of that process that led to that order. It's just the first time we're learning about the details of that analysis and this prediction that another accident would happen within 10 months. Of course, 5 months later, Ethiopian Flight 302 crashed.
Yeah, what does it mean that the FAA knew about the risk before the Ethiopian air crash you mentioned earlier this year? Should they be held accountable? Can they be held accountable?
Well, I think you have to keep in mind that in the days immediately after a plane crash, there are a lot of things you don't know yet. And they were certainly in the process of gathering information, and it was becoming clear that there was a malfunctioning sensor that may have triggered this reaction. But a week after the crash, 10 days after the crash, it was still not as well understood as it is today. And in fact, at a hearing today, an FAA executive said if we knew then what we know now, perhaps some things would have been handled differently. So I think you have to look at that answer in the frame of what did they know in the days immediately after the Lion Air crash. They knew that there was an issue and that it would need to get fixed, and that in the interim, there was a procedure in place to address a trim event, as they would call it, this sort of command to put the nose of the plane down that the pilots aren't telling the plane to do. And if they followed that procedure, the belief was that would be enough to counteract this.
All right, Kris Van Cleave, thank you.